Hi, and welcome back to part 5 of today's lecture series. And as you can see, I am now out on the porch. So in this section, I'm going to be talking a little bit about one of the kinds of Roman architectural structures that is most explicitly bound up with this connection with the natural world that we've sort of already seen coming forward in both the public and private spheres. And that is the structure of the villa. And what a Roman villa is actually a pretty complicated subject, and it is still debated where the sort of origins come from and what the different types of terms that are applied in Latin actually signify about different kinds of villas. But the sort of rough rundown that I'm going to give you right now is that there are sort of three main types of villa. The villa rustica, so the rustic villa, which is sort of more of just a countryside farm with less emphasis on the kind of dwelling structures and rooms of representation, entertainment spaces, highly decorated spaces that we might see in, say, a townhouse. The second type of villa is the villa urbana, and this can either be a reference to geographically where the villa is. Is this a villa-like house that is in a cityscape, like the house of Octavius Quartio, for example, in Pompeii that we just saw? Or it can be a villa that is fancy, right? So one that has sort of highly decorated townhouse-like features, or one that is located in a suburban area like our Villa of the Mysteries that I show you the plan of here on this slide. A third type of villa is the seaside villa, the Villa Maritima, and this might be one that is involved, say, in pisciculture, in seaside farming activities, right? Or it may be a villa that is located on the seashore, but is of the urbana type, right? So very much bound up in the sort of self-representation through decoration, the social structures of the Roman house. All of these ideas about elite representational space will show up in these fancier maritime villas, like they do oftentimes in a villa urbana. What all these structures have in common, and the sort of main definitional point about what a Roman villa is that it is a larger house, or at least a larger piece of land property, but it has at least a pretension towards agricultural or piscicultural or viticultural production facilities, right? So it should at least look like a space where you could grow something and process it. It may also, once we sort of get into the rise of villa culture, starting from the late Roman Republic period up through the imperial period, it becomes also this arena of sort of social differentiation and decorative exploration, but there's always this root in productivity, at least apparent productivity. Now, in terms of the chronological development of the villa type and of its significance in Roman society, the earliest ones that we see do tend to conform more frequently to the villa rustica type, to a facility that is more on the productive side rather than on the sort of decorative side. And then starting really from the late Republican period and then onwards, we really see this fluorescence of the villa type, particularly in areas that are along the coast, such as the Bay of Naples, and around the coast sort of the up above Rome as well. We see these villas really proliferate and become status symbols where the elites of society might own multiple properties spread all across the sort of Italian peninsula and even beyond sometimes, that they could move between. And they would be areas that could sort of support an enormous retinue of slaves, of family members, of associates who might be coming in and out of these properties, which would be then seasonal. Places where the sort of patron of the house could use as a stopover while traveling, in addition to as a sort of country retreat from the business of the city. So in villa culture, once we sort of get this fluorescence of villas that conform more to the urbana or maritima type, we get an emphasis on what is called otium, this sort of proper use of your leisure time for activities like intellectual activities or even gardening, but some sort of productive use of pleasure time. And it is the opposite of negotium, non-otium, which is the Latin word for business. So the villa landscape really becomes an expression of otium over time, especially with these elite properties like some of the ones we'll be looking at today. So just a quick rundown of a couple examples. Here's our Villa Regina. This is a rustica type found just outside Pompeii in an area called Bosco Reale. And here you can see a sort of barn structure, a garden plot out here, the courtyard that all of the rooms of the villa are sort of arranged around, so we don't really see too much evidence of that atrium style domus structure being integrated into these rustica type villas. The entrance is over here on to the right of this barn structure. And then if we look at the courtyard itself, here you can see, here's where it is on the plan. We have a little bit of a peristyle, but instead of a garden plot that is highly decorative, we have one that houses these dolia, these storage vessels that are below ground and enormous, that help out with the productivity aspects of this estate. So this Villa Rustica example is really given over mostly to productive activity, and much less emphasis is placed on the sort of decorative and entertainment spaces, the idea that this should be a stopover space for a good seasonal party of elites is not so much expressed by the art and architecture of these sites. An example of the sort of suburban type of villa might be the Villa of the Mysteries at Pompeii. This is one of our most famous sites of a Roman villa just outside the city gates of Pompeii, and very famous for its second style paintings, especially those of this Room of the Mysteries that show a mystery rite, perhaps a Bacchic mystery rite that we will be discussing in a couple weeks, actually more in depth. The Villa of the Mysteries is also mostly arranged around this courtyard area, with a little garden patch and some activity spaces. In addition to its really beautiful rooms of representation, we have lavish second style and some third style wall paintings that are very rich in color, very rich in detail, carefully executed. We also have evidence of a press, so we have evidence that productivity was going on here, that the property was actually growing grapes and olives for production, either for the household or for greater distribution. Some of those pictures aren't quite clear. So we see this remarkable proliferation, especially around this area of the Bay of Naples, this coastal realm where we have very beautiful sea breezes, healthful air, a very, very fertile volcanic soil. So this is an area in which a lot of agricultural produce grows particularly well. So it becomes really a focus not only of agricultural productive culture, but also of these sort of elite summer houses that crop up along the coastline as a place to escape from the sort of sensory overload of the city, the bad smell of people maybe throwing chamber pots out into the street, the overwhelming need to conduct business at all times. These things all sort of fall away in our realm of the villas. And here we just see a miniature painting of the exterior of a villa structure. So the last villa that I want to introduce you to that we're going to look at more closely in the next section is Villa A at Oplontis. And Oplontis is located sort of between Herculaneum and Pompeii, roundabout here on our Bay of Naples. And nowadays this villa is set a little bit inland, but in the past the structure actually to the south looked out directly over about a 40-foot cliff down above the beach here, over the Bay of Naples, with a beautiful sort of sea view opening up directly from the southern facade of the building. Now it's of course below ground due to the volcanic eruption and the burial of the area. Now, Oplontis Villa A is one of the most sort of luxurious villas that we have. It has a potential imperial connection with Nero's wife Poppaea, given an amphora that was found on the site that has an inscription to Secundus of Poppaea, probably a slave. So there's a potential connection to the imperial house here, but not necessarily a confirmed one. So I'll treat this space just as sort of any old elite luxury space as I'm discussing it, rather than focusing on the connection to the imperial world. And if we look at a plan of the site, you can see there's about 100 rooms in this villa, which is a pretty astounding amount. And a fair amount of the villa is given over, of its sort of ground area is given over to garden spaces, both those that surround the facade on the outside, such as here and then even here, but also sort of perforating the interior space of the villa block. There are, I think, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sort of open spaces in this villa that are roofless, that are in the center of the architecture rather than surrounding it on the outside. So a lot of courtyard area to cover here. And Villa A is sort of best known for its remarkably well-preserved architecture, as well as its lavish wall paintings, particularly those of the second style, that architecturally immersive style that we find, for example, here in the atrium of the space. You've seen these pictures before. Here's a close-up of one of those. And then we have these other second style paintings showing the sort of opening up onto exterior space, a little bit of a hinted at shrinescape just beyond the frame of this very beautiful and elaborate public style architectural scheme that we see. So the second style paintings are sort of what Oplontis is known for. Another thing that it's known for is the east wing. If we look at the east wing of the villa here, which is the latest addition architecturally to the space, we have a wonderful enfilade, these connected rooms that look into one another. And 1, 2, 3, 4 of these are garden spaces. So it's well known for this architectural enfilade where all of the garden spaces share this sort of painted scheme of a yellow background with a garden scene above red frames, which also share garden scenes on them, populated with fountains and birds that open out into one another along a really elongated visual axis, and sort of plays with the framing between the windows of these spaces. So that's another very famous aspect that, as you're reading Bergman's article for this week, she focuses on a great deal, are these this enfilade of Viridaria interior garden spaces in the east wing. Now along the outside of the east wing here, so our enfilade is in here architecturally, and then we have this long portico, Portico 60, that looks out here onto this east garden. We have an enormous marble-clad swimming pool here, and then to the right of to the left of the pool here in our photograph, we have a line of trees and stones that mark the areas where statuary had originally been erected. So we have this rich visual landscape that sort of melts together elements of the natural world, landscaping features, so human manipulation of elements of the natural world, and also the statuary, so these man-made decorative elements in one place working together, allowing for the sort of associative readings that we hear about in our Bergman articles, as well as some really interesting sort of changes over time as, say, plant growth grows around the statues and changes the way that they look, seasonality, weather, all of these things start to play a role in the decorative sphere of these spaces. When we start thinking about how the natural world figures here at this villa as a sort of agent in creating decorative space. So here I just have a brief diagram that shows you some of the statuary and where it was found. A quick note on Oplontis A, I will come back to this in the next lecture. It was apparently abandoned at the time of the eruption, so a lot of the stuff was in storage areas rather than where it would have originally been displayed. So when you're reading this diagram, these dotted lines mean that that was in a storage area. So here's just some examples. I'm running out of time, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. We'll come back to Oplontis in the next lecture. Here are some of the centaur statues from the North Garden. And then what I want you to do right now for your sort of task is to start thinking a little bit about the way that time and sensory experience play in when we have the introduction of the natural world and the outdoor exposure into the decorative sphere. And just in 3 to 4 sentences, how would the elements of nature you identified in your last part of this assignment maybe affect the sensory experience of the house when they enter into it, right? So what happens to the decorative sphere and to the social sphere when we have this introduction of the natural world? All right, I'll see you in the next lecture.